Dan, we might actually have a Democrat to thank for this not being even worse than what we're seeing right now. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, his spokeswoman, told the Washington Post that the senator believes it's time for leaders to put political agendas aside, reevaluate, and adjust to these economic realities that the country faces to avoid taking steps that add fuel to the inflation fire. I mean, if it wasn't for Manchin killing Build Back Better and every other astronomically expensive leftist idea, we would be so much worse off. I mean, do you think this administration is also, do you think they're trying to reset the American economy?
Well, let's start with Joe Manchin. Look, he's no superhero. He's just applying some common sense. If you're stuck in a hole, stop digging. And that's basically what Manchin is saying. Now, as far as what the Biden agenda really is, I'll take a little bit of a different approach here. And let's say that this is not intentional. Well, if it's not intentional, then it is a gross misunderstanding of how economics work. It's basically supply and demand. So when we had inflation starting to rise as we were coming out of the pandemic, demand was starting up again for product. What does Joe Biden do? They turn around and they pass this massive spending bill. So now we're increasing the demand side. So if you understand how a scale works and you want to keep it even, supply and demand, keep it in line. What they were doing was juicing up demand when we already had supply chain problems. So they made the situation much, much worse.
Well, you know, we know that part of this whole inflation battle is Biden's war on gas, his war on energy. Liz, you mentioned this earlier. Here's Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Listen.
The more pain we are all experiencing from the high price of gas, the more benefit there is for those who can access electric vehicles.
Yeah, so, you know, initially they tried to be coy about electric being cheaper. Now they're openly admitting that Americans' pain at the pump is benefiting them. I mean, no wonder Biden's poll numbers are down the toilet, Liz.
Yeah, and I think, too, when we look at a situation like our economy in our country right now, when we're all paying almost $100 to fill up our gas tank just to commute to work back and forth once a week, when we see what's happening, we have to identify what it is of what we're seeing. We have to say, okay, is this an incompetent administration or is this an administration with an ulterior motive? And in the case of the Biden administration, it's pretty easy for us to see that they're engaging in a philosophy on spending called modern monetary theory. Modern monetary theory is actually a very far left theory on monetary policy that calls for radical leftists to spend money they don't have and to print money if they need it. They say debt doesn't matter, deficit doesn't matter, Congress doesn't need to appropriate money to fund your radical leftist programs, especially social programs, especially as it pertains to climate change. Just print the money and spend the money, and they don't care about inflation. They don't care about how much it hurts the American people. This is just their way of pushing their far leftist agenda on our country. Once we understand that that's what the Biden administration is doing, that's the theory that his financial advisors adhere to, then we can see why this is happening and understand how we can put a stop to it.
Dan, I've got about 30 seconds, but I want to ask you, as we look towards the midterms, what do you expect we'll see with inflation?
I think inflation is going to stay on course exactly as it is, at least through the midterm election. And the reason I say that is what we were just talking about. Energy. Unless we have a dramatic change in energy policies, things are going to stay very expensive for a long, long time. That's the supply side that we're missing out on here.
And we're going to see a red wave for certain. Liz Wheeler, Dan Geltrude, thank you both so much. Great to see you.
Thank you.